But let's get to the big story of the week in some respects, of course. It's been rumbling on for quite some time. Is Prigozhin dead? Let's get the views of Tobias Ellwood, chair of the Defence Select Committee and the Conservative MP for Bournemouth East. Tobias, thank you for making the time for us this morning. Before we get into what's going on further afield, I do just want a quick reflection on your shared time in Parliament with Nadine Dorries. Will she be missed?
I thought you might begin with that question. It's been an undignified chapter, I'm afraid. What she's done has been self-serving. It's been distracting to delay, her resignation in this way. I don't really want to spend a lot of airtime on this, if I may. The episode of colleagues throwing their teddies in the corner, in this case for simply not getting a peerage, has been messy. It's been embarrassing for both the Parliament and specifically to our party. So I'm pleased we're now able to move on. Whatever you do in Parliament, whatever positions you take, must firstly be in the country's interests, and then secondly in the party's interests. And what she and others have done recently fails on both accounts. How you conduct yourself in moments of difficulty or disappointment actually exposes. And delaying this resignation was designed, we know, to maximise harm to the Prime Minister. I'm pleased that this sort of selfish charade is now over. The party can now move forward, and we pick up the pieces and we repair. We have a fantastic candidate now in Festus Akinboisoy, and I believe we will retain the seat. We were drawing a line on what's happened in the past. Rishi Sunak can consolidate. We're expecting a reshuffle soon. Provide his stall for where we're going to take the country after a very difficult period over the last, 5 to 10 years with COVID and with Ukraine absolutely affecting our economy. And we've not heard anything from Labour, I have to say. They've just benefited from the fact, that we've had these distractions on the front pages. Let's now draw a line. Let's now move on. Let's win that by-election in Bedfordshire.
You mentioned Keir Starmer seems to have been a fairly lucky general in the last year or so with his opponents. I suppose one person who was a less lucky general was Mr. Prigozhin, who may or may not have met a rather sticky end in the skies of Moscow last week. What is your view, firstly, on whether or not Mr. Prigozhin is alive or dead?
Well, I have huge respect for the British intelligence services. They work very closely with our American counterparts, the Five Eyes community as well. I'm sure behind the scenes they've been working carefully, listening, GCHQ, putting all their thoughts together. When they come out and say that that they presume that he's dead, then I think that's effectively that's good enough for me. The more important point is then what happens. This curious character and where this goes with President Putin. He spent 23 years sort of consolidating his power base, popular from the start, don't forget, because he turned the Russian economy around after the collapse of the Soviet Union. No one could touch him. But after that attempted mutiny in June, Putin realized that the Wagner Group had to be brought down. Don't forget, this is the group, his private army, and he placed Prigozhin, his former close friend, in charge to do his dirty work abroad, propping up dictators in Africa, for example, stealing their gold in Sudan, certainly, to pay for these wars. And the frustration with Prigozhin and what was going on with the inept decision-making in Ukraine, he turned his tanks on Moscow. And this is the critical point. This private army charging toward Moscow, and there was no Russian force able to stop him. Only a deal in exile was able to allow this to actually, to end. And Prigozhin also took that southern city of Rostov-on-Don, if you remember. They cheered him in the streets. So Putin is now in a very, very dangerous position. He's going to want to consolidate his base. But for me, this is the beginning of the end of President Putin.
And Tobias, I do want to dig deeper into this question of Ukraine, because we've started to see other countries in Europe offer fighter jets to that country. And whereas perhaps under the leadership of Boris Johnson, the United Kingdom was on the front foot in supporting Ukraine, it does see when it comes to the supply of jets, the United Kingdom is actually behind countries like the Netherlands and some of the Scandinavian countries.
I understand that argument. I don't fully agree with it, simply because you have to send in the right military equipment, what makes sense for the Ukrainians to use. When they have such a mixture, if you like, of kit coming their way, it all comes with procurement and supply chain lines and so forth, the different types of training. So we need to consolidate around single platforms which the Ukrainian fighter pilots, MiGs and Sukhoi, can easily jump into and fly. The F-16 is the clear favorite. That's what they want. And just as like the Leopard tank is the key one. Now, we gave our Challenger tanks, but that was political. That was a bold move by the Conservative Party, by Rishi Sunak, and then it encouraged other countries to step forward. Our leadership here has been quite phenomenal, I have to say. Everybody's been very risk averse at the beginning. Do you remember defensive, offensive, weapon system debates and so forth? We sent in NLAWs, we've sent in Storm Shadow missiles. We're training them on Salisbury Plain. And then those tanks came in as well. We've done a lot to move this forward. It is for other nations to recognize that it's the F-16 that is now required. This gives the top cover to the tanks when they do those counter-offensive moves to try and break through Russian lines.